today. January 10th, work session for the Dayton City Council. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Thanks everyone for getting together. I know this is kind of a last minute kind of thrown together work session, but the big thing for city staff is we need some direction on what to do with the historic village. It's kind of been moving forward as an item that needs to be addressed. I put together a meeting agenda item to kind of go through some of the things that have been done in the past with the historic village so that we have some framework of what we have done before. And then see if that's really the right plan to be able to do, what the vision is for this council to be able to do down in the historic village, and if we need to redo the plan, what kind of plan we want to have. We'll talk about some limitations that we may have on that plan, long-term things that we'll have to worry about, and then is it a big priority to push this historic village plan going forward. So what I will start with is the historic village framework plan and some of the history that I could find with it. It's the historic village framework plan, which I did send out to the council, oh boy, a couple weeks ago or so, to be able to review. This was done during the 2030 comp plan. None of us were on the council or here, most likely, during that time, except for maybe Chief Enga and Marty. But that was done in 2004, adopted in the 2030 comp plan as the kind of the direction and the vision of the historic village. It did include revamping different areas of the historic village area, building some walkways across the river, building some walkways other ways across the river to create more connectivity within the area and create kind of a 5-minute walk area, of the historic village. It also increased density in this area quite a bit by adding more townhomes / high-rise apartment buildings in certain areas and trying to highlight some of the main corridor area, kind of dead center of the historic village. I'm not sure if you guys have any questions on this. I don't have a ton of history with this plan from what I could, just besides what I could read. And then this was nothing's really been done with this plan since it's been put into place. Essentially, it was just put into place and then, yep, we'll deal with it when we get to it, and then nothing's really happened since then. So I would like to have some feedback, or city staff would like to have some feedback on what you guys think of this plan, concepts, so on and so forth that you like, don't like. Should we scrap this plan? Should we not look at that? And then we'll move on to the next topic.
So when you say next topic,
No, the next topic on the agenda, which would be to talk about the Minnesota Design Team work, which was done in 2015.
yeah.
So, yeah, to go in steps, try to get some direction would be, okay, let's start with one plan, and we'll talk about the next plan, and maybe they incorporate some of the same ideas or some of the same concepts as best we could. The Minnesota Design Team plan, that one didn't have, I wasn't able to find like the final design for that. I essentially don't know what happened to it. I got forwarded some slides from Eric Lucero to be able to look at some slides that were presented, but that's all he could find, and that's all I could find as well. I don't know what happened to the rest of it, to be honest. And I know it was a lot of work done, so it's kind of frustrating that that's just gone. But.
Well, I think in the end it wasn't too dissimilar to this, but I probably got it back in some of my stuff.
Yes, so to get David caught up here, what city staff needs to do is to be able to have some direction on what to do with the historic village area in general. I know that we may not be doing the whole thing right now, and I don't think city staff is expecting us to have this done in 5 years or in 10 years, but it's just having some direction of, okay, we're good with this kind of plan, or we're good with this direction, so that we can make decisions or bring things forward to council that would be able to fulfill that plan, instead of us bringing something to council and then everyone goes, why are we talking about this, or why are we doing this, and then we look like we just pushed something in front of the council that you don't like.
And this is really stemming from the EDA,
Correct.
because they
Yep.
have an interest in the historic village and want
And I think
direction.
in getting back to that point, I think the primary push for this, I think, right now is the guided use.
Yep.
And so really it boils down to, do we want to keep, well, the land use right now. So this got chunked out, this chunk got pulled out of the 2040. But,
Yep, it is all guided use as mixed use.
so it's still mixed use,
It is still mixed use as
Which-
it exists today.
in that context is medium density.
Yeah, the thing with that, it's an area. So that area is mixed use, which means it's a set amount per acre. Doesn't mean that every acre has to meet the density, but in total, that area has X number of acres, which means to meet that number of density per acre. So you might have a single-family home on this 3rd-acre lot or something, but then over here, you're gonna have a high-rise apartment that's gonna have
Yeah.
12 or 15 units per acre in that area.
So if we were to assume that's medium density, what does that do for the sewer numbers? And I guess this is probably a Jason question.
It would put.
How do we service that area utilities?
Oh, yeah, yep.
Yeah, I was just
That's some of
gonna-
the limitations like I mentioned.
Well, and that's what I'm,
certainly short term, because there's not a big enough connection to the city of Otsego. Even long term, it's possible to serve it to the south once the sewer is extended all the way up there. I believe that's been accounted for, the flows through there for the long term, but that's
yeah.
many
right.
years out.
So, and
Do
that
we
was
even
my
have
understanding is,
an estimate on when that would be? I mean, is that
Depends
2040,
on when
2050?
it's in the post 2050 for staging.
So I would
so-
say 30 years of sewer.
and that assumes it gets up there. That assumes we don't do anything else with that area. But my understanding is the Otsego connection is the limiting factor today.
Not the Otsego connection, the pipe in the ground.
Yes, the connection, the physical.
Yeah, Otsego has,
Yeah, they
Capacity.
they have plenty of capacity. It's the physical pipe
It's the
Yeah.
pipe when we,
in the ground.
So that's Siegel's pipe coming up to us, or is it our pipe going to us?
Ours all the way to
Thank
their
you.
facility.
so what is the realistic limitation there? So here's what I'm getting at. If we say medium density and we start getting plans, we start getting requests, permit requests, we're gonna have to satisfy, we're gonna have to do them.
Probably do some of their infrastructure beforehand then.
Well, I guess that's my question. If we're limited by that, we
Yeah.
got a problem right off the bat.
Well, first off, you gotta find somebody that's going to develop into, to get that density. I mean, currently, there's not, we don't have anybody that's gonna stick 30, 40, 50 million bucks into this.
Well-
That's true, but if we
Even
open
if-
it up to be redeveloped and we don't have the capacity for somebody to do that, then we're kind of on the hook to
Yeah.
provide that.
And that's what I'm getting at.
And so it could push us into when that happens.
Because if somebody, I mean, if you see, and I personally, I would prefer the medium density. The problem is, I don't know what that capacity is.
Well, you have essentially no capacity right now for expansion.
Right.
So every single-family home we replace with, say, 3 townhomes, we got a problem. Or
It will come
building
soon.
will-
It will come to.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean,
You
you
could
can
essentially
support
say
a
zero,
minimal amount.
but it's not actually zero, it's like 25 or 30 or something like
Well,
that.
that's what I'm wondering. So right now, we have 200 homes on this system?
I think like 240.
240?
It's somewhere in that region, yeah.
240, and do we know what the capacity is?
A lot of variables, depends on where you're putting it into the system. We did some really back-of-the-napkin calcs. We thought possibly it could support up to another 100 units, but that's probably pushing it. And that's making some assumptions that all the connections are in the right place and
And what happens if we push it beyond where we estimated, or the estimates fall short?
well, your sewer doesn't
Yeah.
keep up and probably back up
That's catastrophic.
at some point. It is, yeah. That's property damage, yeah. Yeah.
It's not just a matter of getting another pump in there to,
No, that's the first level upgrades that could be made.
Yeah.
For example, I mean, if we put more on there, we could do modifications to the lifts. The lift stations are your biggest, that can't keep up. They were designed for a certain number of flows. So we could update those, probably get some more capacity out of them to help. And then the next step up would be the actual pipes in the ground, which gets very expensive very fast.
I think you're limited a little bit in the lift stations with the depth of the wet wells in there.
You'd probably have to replace the whole structure.
Yeah.
You could probably do pumps and buy another 10% capacity. It's not gonna be anything significant,
Yeah.
but it's a cheap one. I mean, it's a $100,000 upgrade rather than a half a
It's
million
when
dollar
the
upgrade.
density changes from single family to now high density, high rise apartments, that's when we come into issues because of the flow.
Yeah.
Now you have 100 units in every room, and then you got this and that, and versus one single family house, now you have 15 units per acre, so now you're talking, that much more flow in that area. Especially if you want this medium density in total, or whatever you want it to be.
And our medium density doesn't support apartments, right?
Medium density would be townhomes,
Yes.
yep, attached townhomes. High density would be apartment buildings. So,
Is there a number to how many townhomes in one unit that you could get, or is it just whatever fits in that?
it'd probably
Townhome fits
be
on that
what,
lot.
yeah, probably what fits on that lot, or the lots that are combined or.
Or if they combine lots, yeah.
Yeah, correct, they could fit as many as they can on there.
Yeah.
The idea, of at least if we wanna, so it's hard when we say mixed use in one set area is all mixed use. The reason why is because it's an average for the whole area. And that's why we're having struggles with it now is, okay, yeah, we might be able to put a single family here and be able to support a medium density here, but we're looking at a total area. Now, if we break it down and say, okay, in this plan, let's just say this framework plan up here, we have this couple of lots, we want high density, because that's where we want apartment buildings to be at. And then this area, we want to have mixed use, which would be business and, living upstairs. That would be along, whatever, that would be along
Long.
Down River Road, most likely.
Yeah, yep.
That would be your strip of, okay, that's mixed use. And behind that would be, okay, do we want medium density or high density in this next block as guided use versus giving it a blanket statement of, okay, this is mixed use. It makes it hard for staff to say, okay, this is what we can do here in total because in the whole area meets it. That's where we're struggling as staff is this, well, that doesn't meet the guided use. Well, it technically can if the other part over here does that something different.
Well, and, yeah, you get into planning problems too, because, we've
Correct.
already seen this has additional alleyways.
Correct.
And if you develop something that puts a house in an alleyway, you got a problem.
Exactly. And then what we don't want to do as staff is recommend, say, okay, we want to do this. That's what staff is saying, that we can make that work in our mixed use area. But then in 5 years, we redo this plan and say, no, we want an alleyway going through there. Now we have to wait to either demolish that house, buy it up, or do something else with it in order to put it there
Right.
where, is if we would have just left it as a single family lot or just left it vacant, then we would be able to do that much easier versus having to redo stuff that we approved 5 years ago or even 10 years ago.
Do we have it on the financial plan to update the sewer system in this area at all?
Nope.
Currently?
Nope.
So we could set aside easements
Yep.
for the alleyway if we approve, if we're okay with single-family homes. Not sure what kind of kinks that brings in.
We would just ask them when they would do a single family home, we'd ask for an easement on the backside of their property of X amount, and that would be
And
requested
actually,
during that process
We'd
of
almost
it.
have to, yeah, that's true, it's not a development, we can't just put one in there. That's
We'd have to
true.
request that.
Yep, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, this is a problem that city staff has a struggle with is, yeah, we have an area that says mixed use, that's great, but then we don't want to have to redo work after we say, oh, yep, that'll work, and then we bring it to council and say, yep, this will work for everything. Yeah, it works, that's great, but then we don't want to redo stuff.
Yeah.
And after we go, oh, this plan is not great, it doesn't give us what we need to do long-term, now we want to redo it. So if we have some sort of plan to go with, that would help.
Tim, go ahead.
I'm wondering if I could give a little context to some of the history.
Yeah,
of
go
this. So, for those who don't know, I was on the city council I got elected in 2006. I was on the planning committee that created the comprehensive plan and for the 2030 comprehensive plan. So I'm very familiar with this, and I happen to live in that building right there. So it's a little bit inaccurate to say that nothing was done after this plan was put in place. The city council acquired 2 tax forfeit properties after this was put in place because of this plan. And that plan, those tax forfeit properties were for future redevelopment. Part of the thing that has prompted the just to create this meeting was the EDA got involved and decided to totally derail the original plan, and I don't know what, to be quite honest, they're doing. The plan was to basically acquire property and work with the property owners while we waited for the sewer to arrive. Or if we had a serious problem, to raise enough funds through TIF and other circumstances to address the problem, at least in the short term, until the actual sewer that we wanted arrived. If we keep on what I call the current plan, the plan that we've been doing for the last 15 years, that would work just fine. We have enough capacity for sewer to add about roughly what, Jason, about 30 more houses? 30 more
Right
units?
now, yeah.
Okay, you've got on average 4 units on any of these blocks down here. If you put townhouses in, side by side, attached townhouses, you can get probably 12. So your incremental increase from 4 to 12 is only 8 units. You could completely townhouse 2 sides of this with the current capacity. So there's no issue with that. When this was done, we probably had, I'm going to say 20% of the properties down here were non-owner occupied. Now I'm going to say it's about 60% are non-owner occupied. We've had at least one individual who's not here. He happens to be an elected official and therefore has a night conflicts. He asked me if I could tell him how this goes. But he owns almost 20% of the properties down here. Between him, my family, and a few others, we probably have 25% of the properties already as owned by non-owner occupants. In other words, they're rentals. The plan was long-term, just to continue to acquire property. The properties that we acquired are on this block, and this block. And the properties that the city owns already account for enough property on these 3 blocks to do surface water mitigation with the properties that we have currently acquired. Selling those properties just by themselves, even if you left them empty, presents problems. Take this particular area right here where Mr. Lucero wants to put townhouses. If he had to acquire the property next to him for, say, $100,000, then to put the townhouses in, he would have to have surface water and road easements, where you would be requiring him to give back basically the equivalent amount of property. So that's another $100,000 in cost. If he's borrowing money to finance this thing, he's got interest payments on top of that. If he's making 20% profit, he's now having to pay an additional $250,000 approximately for the development of these properties, versus if you had just let him use that property that the city owns for those easement spaces. So why we would be giving the property away kind of concerns me. But from the standpoint of the plan was always to, when we get to the point where the sewer is here, after having waited for property owners to acquire these things and for the city to acquire key pieces, then to have a sit down with the community, which is what the Minnesota design team basically said when they were here in 2015, is just keep doing what you're doing. Just keep acquiring properties, keep having a vision, and when you get to the point where you're getting ready to develop, have a sit down with the community owners here, just like they did in Champlin. Champlin took 25 years for the development that they're doing on the riverfront to happen. And it basically didn't happen. They didn't put a shovel in the ground until the last 5 years. The first 20 years were working with the residents and property owners and planning. So the fact that this is now moving forward at a time frame that I find strange concerns me. The plan should continue to be the plan. Now, the thing about this plan is this was not done by engineers per se. This was done by artists. This was done by Bonestro. They did our 2030 comp plan. They are engineers, but there was no engineering in this. So when you're looking at this, this is a pretty picture, but it's not necessarily what is structurally possible. What is structurally possible was done just before I left as the mayor, and worked with our engineering firm at that point in time, and they went and they looked at surface area, how much easement you're going to need, how much sewer you're going to need, how much sprinkling you're going to need. The issue, in addition to sewer, is also water. You cannot develop this without a water tower in this area. Is that the correct statement, Jason?
Yeah.
So you've got multiple things that you need to look at. But at the same time, and by the way, it's not in our comprehensive plan, because our comprehensive plan is, or not comprehensive plan, our 10-year CIP, because our 10-year CIP is a 10-year period. This is beyond the 10-year period. So that's why it's not in here, but when we get to that point, it would be included in the CIP just as a regular course of planning. We do have a property owner, maybe a quarter mile away, who just bought a bunch of property. He's planning on putting an event center there somewhere. That's his plan. Now, what he doesn't know, or what he is going to find out, is that to have an event center, you're also going to need a water tower. We have a Catholic school that has to start construction within the next 10 years. Otherwise, they lose the property that was donated to them. They also need sprinkling. So the time frame is getting pushed up on this, but not pushed up on we have to do something tomorrow, other than you've got this one property here that's forcing that. Now, in terms of density, it's my understanding that the density we have in the rest of the city comes out to about 3 units per acre, just above that. If you start developing this area in something less than the 8 units per acre minimum that we've got, you're gonna have to do a comprehensive plan change. In fact, you might have to do a comprehensive plan change amendment just to even do individual houses, because the Met Council doesn't particularly like you saying you're gonna have 8 units per acre and then putting in, 3 units per acre. They get a little upset when you do that. So doing anything with this that's a change is going to prompt some very serious conversations that happen at a planning level. So that's a lot of information I just was doing off the top of my head.
Okay, well, I think we got enough background.
Yeah, and then the other thing I'm just going to mention is some of the back of the napkin math that was done when we were doing the framework most recently indicated that if you were to TIF this entire area, you could probably raise in the neighborhood of $20 to $30 million in TIF funds that would be used to help create the infrastructure that's in here. That's if you have the redevelopment TIF that can be done over 25 years. So the financing is also there. Special assessments, you can do bridge loaning that allows the private developers to use the city's lending rate. There's a whole bunch of tools that DEED and the state of Minnesota and whatnot allow you to use in redevelopment. And I don't know if anyone here has ever been involved in redevelopment. I haven't personally, but I've talked to 2 cities that have. I've talked to developers who have. I've got friends who are developers who I consulted when we were doing this. So I might be the closest thing you have to an expert in redevelopment in this room, and I'm not claiming to be a redevelopment expert at all, but I've looked into a lot of these things. So I'll leave you with that, and if you have more questions, I'm sitting right over here.
Thank you, Tim.
So Jason, did you work on that plan, that kind of refresh?
No, the one more recent?
Yeah.
No, it was done by our landscape architect, so they were just putting together some graphics. They did do some measurements and put some basic info together, but it's
Okay.
not designed by any means. It's preliminary.
So what does, so let's say we do jack up the density, what does that do to surface water? What what do they have to do, what do we have to do to handle that? So I'm assuming there's just simply more impervious surfaces
Yeah,
and
and if it's redeveloped, they'd have to treat all of the new impervious. Right now, if it's below a threshold, you can just get away with treating the new impervious.
Okay.
That rule is changing. We've actually talked about that on the city project. So I would say either way, they would have to treat 100% of the runoff generated by the impervious surface. And I would assume this is going to get pretty impervious, or I mean, there'd be corridors and whatnot. So they would have to treat it all to today's standards, which are much more stringent than what we did.
What does that mean? So let's say we take the property we're talking about, and we get a, alleyway, I don't know what the requirements are on an alleyway, are we like 16 foot, what does that mean for, do we have that specified even?
For a width, we have a private drive at 18, I think, is probably the closest we have as far as width, but I don't know. I would think it could be narrower than that yet.
And so when you put that in there, you put in the fact that the townhomes do have a lot more roof area. What does that mean? What do they physically have to do to mitigate that?
That's construct stormwater BMPs to satisfy the rules, so the efficiency as far as the treatment, and so you have to control quantity, prevent flooding, and treat it, make it clean before discharging. So they have to meet that. You can get very creative how you do that. Pretty big footprint, though. I mean, ponding is the general way of accomplishing it because it's the most cost-effective, real estate aside. So as far as area-wise, I guess I'm not sure. I would say probably 20% of your land, 10% of your land. Much more efficient if you do regional ponding to treat a large area.
That's what I was gonna.
That's gonna be a huge advantage here. I mean, if you go piece by piece, each one's gonna have to meet their rules, and it's gonna be less efficient. It's a lot cheaper to dig one big hole rather than 6 little ones.
No, I get that. Okay.
Okay, so this is the framework plan. We'll touch base on this just so you have that. And then I will go through some of the slides that were shared in regards to the work done by the Minnesota Design Team in 2015. Still, I'm unsure of where to find the final product, but this was done in 2015 by the Minnesota Design Team to be able to help us try to figure out what we need to do in total. We touch base on a few of the different things here, but the main ones are giving us some land use items and ideas to look at. What does 3 units per acre mean? What does it look like? I will share this with the council as well. I don't know if I did already or not, but if I did not, I will share this as well. And then
Haven't seen it.
you
I
have
haven't
not.
seen
Okay.
that.
I will.
This was
I will
back from,
send.
yeah, the
Yeah,
by
this is-
design thing.
Yeah.
But this was also a
Ye-
a citywide thing.
Yeah, it did
right?
citywide thing. It was
And-
not just
and
the
we're-
historic village.
Yeah.
There was a portion of it that was historic village, which this is the redevelopment opportunity on Balsam Lane. We did do this and actually followed through with this with the boulevard in there and having an apartment building. So it was something that we utilized during that process. Redevelopment of Sundance is one other thing that they looked at to be able to figure out if we could be able to do those redevelopment. And then Village as a Gateway, this was the part of the historic village that they looked at and be able to figure out how we would be able to use things in total. Opening the door, putting a roundabout in, footbridge, what they had mentioned, very similar to the historic village framework plan that we had just reviewed. Being able to move in, put some senior living here on the space just south of the historic village area, creating a full corridor to be able to utilize the entire area along the Crow River,
So
and then mixed use area in the downtown.
regarding that senior living, and I've
Yes.
also talked to Morissette said it had asked about that, because it seems like a good spot also, their property. But this and the other portion of Hillmish land that was gonna get the school, if we're limited in capacity for sewer,
Yeah, this I don't think you could do the senior living facility as if that's what we want to do. As this, we might say, yeah, we want to do that. That's the plan, right?
Right.
But that doesn't mean it can be accomplished until we have X, Y, and Z done before that. The idea to create a plan or to have an idea is, okay, we want this in the future. That's great. That gives staff an idea of, we want this. How do we get there?
Yep,
Um,
I get that,
yeah.
I guess literally what I'm wondering is, so as Tim mentioned, that property has a time on it.
Oh,
I don't
that's not
see-
this property. That
No,
is the
no.
property
Yeah.
to south, the
Yep.
school property. Yep.
I think it's directly east of Wichita and slightly south, I
It is
believe.
directly at the end of 152nd. That is why city staff has dragged their feet on 152nd, exactly.
It's right, basically where the moving is.
Correct, yep. And that's the reason why city staff has dragged their feet on 152nd is because we know that they need water at that spot in order to do it. That happens to be the highest point in the north side of Dayton to be
Well-
able to put the water tower on.
They also need sewer, right? Or do
Doesn't
they?
necessarily need sewer. You
Does-
can do sewer
you
in a
would-
temporary fashion.
Yeah, you could do sewer, but the problem is that sewer has to come from the south of that area because we couldn't. we
No,
have
I
to-
know, but could they have a local treatment? Septic system?
If we allowed it, we did it one time with, over here by South Diamond Lake.
Yep,
and
no, I know we did.
It didn't turn out well for
No,
us,
it's not good.
so that's why we may not
not
want to do it
recommended.
again. So, city staff wouldn't recommend it, but we could do it if that's what direction is.
They're not good.
Well, that's because they're multiply owned. I mean, every there's boatloads of houses here that have septic.
Yeah, so if the septic
Yeah,
isn't
yeah.
the limiting factor, the water is for them. So if we put a water tower at the end of 152nd, we have to be able to feed it, so we put the water underneath 152nd, which is why we don't wanna put a new road on there.
Yep,
Because we put the utilities underneath
It all
it, now we have to redo
cascades.
it again.
yeah,
Redo it again.
okay, so, I'm sorry.
You got it. Nope, you're great. No,
Which hopefully you're indirectly not telling me we're putting a water tower in the next 2 years.
Well,
I'm putting my hands up, I got nothing. So rearranging the furniture or arranging the furniture to figure out how it would work,
it
some of the things that they
also
touched.
assumes all that land between it, as far as the water goes, is developed. Or you
Yeah.
at least somehow.
We would,
run a pipe.
we'd have to go down Brockton. We put the water right down Brockton Lane, along the easement along the east side of that, and then down 152nd, down the middle of the road when we redid the road. If we put the water tower in there, you can't, but you can't not put, what I learned is you can't just put the water line in right now, because it doesn't have the pressure to keep it out, so then it will just break. As soon as you put the road over it and drive over it.
Oh,
I don't
sure.
know about that, yeah.
So as the new guy, it seems like there's a bit of what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? So like, we may like the plan, but if we like the plan and we say the plan's once developed, we don't have the pipe there, then
Correct.
we're in
got
a, we're in a
dollars
problem.
infrastructure that we gotta
If we do
put in, yeah.
nothing, we have a problem, so at some point in time, we have to make a decision and then make actions around that. Is that, am I understanding kind of the situation properly?
Well,
Or we just do nothing with this land that the EDA sounds like they wanna do something with, we just hold on to it, knowing that this is probably where we wanna go, but that buys us a little bit of time. That's the
Well,
three
That's,
options.
that's what the plan always was, and I'm a little confused as to why that's deviated from the plan. If you do nothing other than hang on to your property, if you just wait until 10, 15, 20 years from now, when you're ready to pull the trigger, and you have all the facilities there. That's the, to me, is the question that I'm confused about. And
Yeah, except for the fact if you wait that long, now you can't provide water to the thing that needs the water, which is the
yeah, I
school.
don't.
Well,
The school needs the water, so now if you don't have anything redeveloped down there, now you have no way to pay for it.
So there's two decisions here then. What do we do with this land? And
Correct.
do we like this plan? If so, how do we make plans to make sure this plan can happen?
Well, I mean, the other part of the plan, it assumes that you're gonna get, it kind of presumes you have retail through the middle, right?
Yep, yeah, essentially. Well,
what-
you don't have to, but that's
Right, otherwise.
kind of
you're
been the
done.
vision, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's kidding,
So,
right?
and so then my question is that feasible? I remember all through that, I don't know that there was squat done for feasibility. It was just, here, let's do this. I don't know if there was anything looked at as
Sure.
far as.
Sure, and we can
Made sense
look
to
at
me.
that, that's something that this council would like to do, is guide us, say, okay, we wanna do a feasibility study to see if we can even do this plan, I mean,
Well, again, I think it would be a big component is what's the realistic expectations that you can run. Commercial through.
I will send the Minnesota design team thing out to the council tonight.
by the way, I
personally
believe
did.
that's the final product of the Minnesota design team. They never did detailed
Sure.
engineering. What their specialty is civic engagement. And they had, in this case, probably 20 or 30 people from the old village
Yep,
on
they
a
had,
special task for that,
Correct.
and then they had 6 other ones. So they had 100 and some people involved in that to create those slides that you were showing.
agreed, yeah, I just didn't know, I couldn't find a final product, and that
I
was,
believe you have the final product. Now,
sure.
all of it, I'm not sure, but that was, you're not gonna get a detailed wireframe.
Because that was just a one-weekend thing, wasn't it?
It was I think 4 or 5 days. but
4 or
yes.
5 days, yeah.
Yep, so then the next thing is, yeah, do we wanna create a new plan? Do we not wanna create a new plan? Do we wanna use a plan? Do we wanna leave what we have in place and just leave it and kinda keep going as we're going?
Well, I don't know that we can, I mean, I have a bunch of questions right now. I don't know that we can create a new plan. Again, if we could just snap our fingers and make this happen, I like this. The problem is.
Agreed.
It's a pretty picture, yeah.
Well, the problem is, these things flow out of other actions. And if we don't have a pipe, you're stuck.
Yep,
If we don't really have the retail,
However, you can grow into this real
Yeah.
slow. I
Staff-
mean,
staff is okay with-
realistically, to me, you
yeah.
grow into it real slow.
Yep.
The amount of lots that the city has now, and you have a partner there that wants to do something
Yep.
on his nickel. I mean, so why not take a couple of them pieces, put a townhouse over one of them and get a
yeah,
restaurant in there or a
My-
cafe or
Yep.
start slow.
and
I
that,
agree.
that makes sense to me, except for I don't know how the water mitigation comes in. I don't know if that puts the brakes on this stuff or what the
Well, you
impact
could-
is.
there's capacity for like, we have 240 units now?
You're talking about stormwater right now? Or are you talking about
Or water,
water?
stormwater?
Because we can,
Storm.
water, physical water we can do, but
Yeah, I'm not worried
stormwater is
about
different.
physical water, stormwater.
You can slowly grab 20, 30, 40 units and deal with what you got
The
now.
the stormwater, you'll be able to accommodate it, it's just a matter of how much real estate you want to lose to your BMPs, or how expensive do you want it to be, because you can retrofit into a small area,
Yeah.
you can put it underground. I mean, there's a way to save space,
What's a BMP?
best management, just a way of treating the stormwater.
Okay.
I don't
a
see
pond
this
would be
pretty
a
picture for the next
simple
50
example.
years, personally. I mean, I just don't see it.
Right, it would have to be pieced in.
I mean, number one, is the public going to support anything down there?
That I
That's
don't
why
know.
there's nothing there.
Well, that's my question about feasibility of retail. If somehow we get an answer that says you're not gonna realistically have much retail down there.
It's reality.
No, that's not, that is 100% not true.
I don't agree.
The plan, first of all, that stuff was there at one point in time, just so that, I'll give you that from a historical standpoint. Second of all, the
What was
plan
there?
was always.
was there?
Pardon me?
What was
There were
it?
multiple
Hotel,
bars and restaurants, there
banks,
was
And it all
a,
left.
there was a lot of stuff
All
down there.
left,
Right.
because you
Yeah.
can't support it.
No, that's not the reason why. The reason why is because the real reason why, the train went through Rogers, not Dayton. So when everything moved from the
Oh,
forward.
you're banking on the bank coming and well, before it's there.
Well, no, when the transportation was the river, it was all supported. When the transportation became something else, it wasn't. But, again, the plan was to create the EDA, to put together a fund, which we didn't have until relatively recently, to spend $30,000, $40,000 to do the plan, to say how to implement this pretty picture. That costs an X amount of money. And that's why the EDA was put together, to actually start taxing so they can create their fund that's not on the general tax burden. Then, as this redeveloped, you pay back the EDA for the money that they spent out of the additional taxes that come out of here, either through TIF or some other forces. So what you see in red is the commercial. That's going to be the last to develop. That's always been the last to develop. That's always been the plan. The very first thing that's going to develop is going to be what's on the Crow River and on the Mississippi River, which is the high-end housing, high-end townhouses,
Yeah.
which you have enough sewer capacity, and if you plan yourself correctly, you have enough surface water management capacity to handle right now. The red becomes a problem because you need all the space that's on the road at zero lot line development, that's going to be all impervious surface, and the parking that's going to be behind it, because you need parking to support all that. That's all going to be impervious surface, so you need to make sure that you have space for the surface water management. Now, again, the lots that were purchased are about what you need for each individual of those blocks. That's not necessarily the right way of doing it. That's just what we were doing as opportunities came up. The plan, the $30,000 or $40,000 that you would spend, those engineers would come back and say, here's the best way of doing it. You might take one of those blocks that currently has nice pretty pictures on it and say, we're going to turn that into a big hole, so we don't have to put 6 individual holes on those individual blocks. And here's what the cost is going to be, and here's what you need to do to assess every individual property, and here's what happens if you have 400 houses here, this is what happens if you have 1,200 houses here, in terms of costing that per individual development. But what you need to do is you need to have a plan so that when someone comes and says, I want to do something, they know what the plan is, and you don't allow them to do something that would be incongruous with the plan. That's how planning works. That's why you have zoning. So yes, you've got a bunch of stuff that's not going to develop right away. It never was designed to develop right away. But you need to actually, you can't tell someone not to do something because maybe sort of iffy. You actually have to be able to say, we're not going to allow you to do this, and here's why. It's on page 127 of our 100-page plan. This is what you need to do. And under that framework, by the way, you could start developing townhouses down there right now. You've got actually a guy sitting right behind me who wants to put townhouses in that would actually match that development right there. And you can do it completely with the stormwater management, with the road access and whatnot, for probably 6 units.
I don't disagree.
Right, so I'm saying, I'm not trying to accuse you guys of anything, I'm saying, this is very doable.
Do you
but the
remember
timeframe is-
if the update that was 4 or 5 years ago, was that update, did that include pawning dealing with rent?
So when I asked them to do it, I asked them to make sure that they left enough space for the alleyways, for the surface water management, and to try to figure out how many units we can fit in there so that when we come up with a number for what the cost is for a water tower or sewer or whatever, we can figure out what the cost per unit is. So the answer to that is yes, in theory, but because you don't have a huge amount of the variables filled in, it's kind of a very vague deal, but yes, it includes stormwater management.
Because if we're gonna do this piecemeal or one property at a time, we're gonna need that.
You really need to do it about a half a block, maybe a quarter of a block at a time. And yes, you
Yep.
definitely need that, and that's what the small area study would do. It's gonna cost you about $30,000 or $40,000, probably 40 nowadays.
How many DDA to spend? They got money, right?
Yeah, there's some money there.
There's money there.
That was literally what was designed for, that money.
Yes, staff needs to know
EDA
what the
would
plan
design
is so that we
it,
can
no
have
money
the
on
plan
it.
ready to go,
Use it for
so we
stuff
can
like
tell them what we need to have happen. There are going to be limitations along the way. At
Yep.
any point of any plan, wherever you start, it's gonna be limitations, no matter what. But city staff needs to know what's the vision, so that we can say, okay, this works with it, or this doesn't work with it. And if it doesn't work with it, that's fine. But then we can say, it doesn't work with it. That's good, that's the right answer.
So the decision you need from us today is, do we like this plan or do we want a different plan?
Correct.
Or,
Yeah,
or
correct.
anything,
Or
right?
some sort of,
Yeah.
plan says, here's what we'd like, here's what the ultimate goal would be. Great, that's fantastic. Then we can get there by saying, okay, this would have to go here, this would have to go here, but then if we get this, then we'll leverage them to be able to do some sewer work or do some water work or whatever, to be able to leverage them to be able to say, okay, you wanna do that, that's great, we're happy to have you there, but we gotta have this in place before we can do that.
By the
That's
way,
great.
this
So
is
I
the plan.
like this plan. I think the one thing that, looking at this plan that I see missing, just seeing what neighboring communities have done, is there's gonna need to be more parking. And I think looking at, like, say what Anoka did, where they had all that boom, they had put that parking ramp in the back again, long term, we're gonna need to have a lot in here somewhere that's gonna have a parking ramp somewhere close to cities so people can walk to these
And
things.
that's
If there
about-
are shops there 40, 50 years down the road.
And that would be, long-term goal was to remove the fire
activity
station.
Station.
Okay.
Move the fire station, then that would turn into a parking ramp, the fire station would then move and we'd go back from.
Perfect.
By the way, this is not a plan, this is a picture.
Yeah,
Sure.
The plan
Yeah.
is what supports it.
Yeah, we need a plan to support this, but I like, I mean, this makes sense to
So,
me.
long-term,
What we can
the
do.
activity center slash fire station would go away, and that would turn into a parking lot. That would be the long
So
term.
let's get
Very nice
very,
picture, I just
Really,
wish I was
so
here
the
at
question
2100
really
to
is, do
see
we,
it.
do
I-
we
I'm
wanna
okay with
take,
that
make the
too.
next step, developing this plan from a
Yes.
drawing into a plan, and who's gonna carry the ball on that?
You got it.
It seems obvious to me that that's well,
EDA.
okay. My thought is that it belongs to the EDA to take that next step. I think that, I wanna correct you on one thing, Tim, that EDA funds are tax money.
No, I
But-
want to be clear that tax money.
But there
comes from
is
EDA,
money
can be
in the bank
repaid
to
by a
use
TIF.
for this kind of thing.
Yep.
And that seems to me to be an entirely appropriate way to put it at, to treat it like a small area plan and develop it into that. And then we've got some options, at least if things are more settled on the plan, then some of these other questions that are really deal busters in a lot of ways can be placed on there. If this is what the development is gonna look like, then it's gonna require this at what point in time? And we gotta have all those answers to go much farther with this.
Yep.
But so I think it belongs to the EDA, and I think we move ahead, have them move ahead with it.
I think it belongs to the EDA with some caveats.
I totally agree with that. It's, even in
Not just
even in
the
the
word.
comprehensive
Yeah.
plan, it speaks to developing an advisory committee under whatever.
They want to be the advisory committee.
No, this includes citizens, this includes
Yeah,
property
exactly.
owners, this
Yep.
includes a group much
National
bigger than
committee of
just
some
the
sort,
EDA
yeah.
members themselves. And I think that's one of the things that I think has to be a part of this as well.
Agreed.
Okay, so we got direction on that. You guys understand what we need
Well,
here?
you got
for
my
those?
opinion.
Well,
No,
I had agreement from Travis and I had
I
agreement
thought
from
about it
Matt,
before, yeah.
so.
I agree exactly.
I don't think
what you're
anybody
saying.
disagree with that.
Citizens to kind of the EDA.
Is there any disagreement with
I don't
that?
think
I
so.
don't disagree with
Yeah,
that.
Scott was nodding.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
You did a
I
great
just-
job.
Thank you,
Yep.
David.
I'm not in favor of borrowing $30-40 million to get that picture right away.
No, not right away.
And at no point did we ever say it's gonna happen tomorrow or in the next 5 years. This might be a 30-year plan. That's fine.
I'll be long gone.
We'll wait. till
After
then.
I'm
I'm
gonna be
gone,
long gone
after I'm
before
gone, you
that,
guys can do
so-
whatever you want.
Yeah, okay, so we talked about limitations of the plan, we kind of hit on that a little bit ago. And then, yeah, is the historic village a priority? It's the last thing is, should we be selling this tax forfeit lot? That's the last question.
I think until we know what this looks like at more than a pretty picture, we should hold on to the lot. That's my
Well,
opinion
and
on it.
whoever buys the lot's gonna also need to know how they're gonna have to interface to this
Plan, that's
run
the
stormwater issue, right?
Yep.
I don't disagree with selling the lot and saying this is what you're building or you don't get it.
But we don't know what they're building yet because we don't know what the detailed plan is. That's why I say I'd rather hold on to the lot.
If you like to,
It's out there.
What's the missed revenue from this lot by not selling it in taxes?
it depends on what kind it is, you know.
Marty mowing it?
If it's, yeah, I mean, the lot's revenue, we haven't, there's been no taxes paid on the property, so if we have taxes paid, well, if for a single family house, you're talking, I don't know, $2,000 or $1,500.
Yeah.
For a townhouse, you're talking, I don't know, $3,000 or $4,000, maybe $5,000.
I would say hold on to it.
We're not
5 or
talking a
6
lot of
townhomes.
money.
I say hold on to it, but we need to get the EDA working on it. We gotta give them a timeline on, like, we need a decision. We need more detailed information on this within X amount of time. So that they get moving on.
Sure, okay. Yeah, no action can be taken here, tonight there's an
Yeah.
agenda item, agenda at the council meeting to be able to approve that and whatever else you guys would like to do, so.
Sure.
Well, now that there seems to be a strong direction, I just wanted to point out that I saw, from a planning perspective, some strong components to that plan, from a transportation, from your green space. So it seems like it's a good base to start massaging into something that could become a reality.
Sure. Yeah, so basically what you guys would like to see is the EDA put together some sort of small area plan-ish area to be able to figure out what we need to do, so that we can put together a plan whether, and I'm not sure what exactly the
Yeah.
stipulations
and I
would be,
guess,
but.
Dave, were you thinking this group that included property owners and
Committee?
whatnot would also decide, are we really talking about mixed use or are we talking about something else? Or are we just making the assumption we're talking about roughly what we're seeing, which is mixed use?
I think, well, my feeling is that we've got a plan here, and that's sort of the starting point,
Yep, okay. So the assumption is mixed use?
yes.
Yeah, okay. In other words, if this group gets together and comes back and says, well, it's all single family, that's not gonna be our
Correct, yeah, right.
expectations.
The idea is that whatever this, I remember the square on the land use plan is mixed use. We'd like to break it down further and say, okay, on this lot, we'd like
Sure.
to have
It's
high
not a blank
density.
sheet of paper.
Correct, it's not a blank
Yeah.
sheet of, okay, this is all mixed use, because that doesn't help us give good direction on what we want.
Yeah.
We want to be able to have, these couple lots are mixed, or high density, so we're able to plan for the stormwater stuff.
Well, and then, and hopefully, I mean, there's also, you're talking about the activity center for parking, there's also probably room for parking on the west side, because I think that's a floodplain.
Yep.
But whatever, so, yeah, they can work out those details.
Correct, yeah, we can work out the details for the smallness of it, if that's the direction of the council, which it sounds like it is. But that, I don't disagree that framework plan's at least a good start, be able to get something going.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else that the historic village we want to have any questions on tonight?
Eric, do you have any questions? No? Nothing? Okay.
Well, I was late, so I don't know.
Well, you've kind of heard everything. Okay.
I'll just make one comment. I live in the village. I live down by the boat landing. And so I'm here, everything that's gonna happen will be after my time. But I've always had an interest. What I'll tell you is that the demographics in the village are rapidly changing. My generation is dying away, moving away, and the new demographic that's coming in is young families. I see it all the time, walking up and down the streets. And that demographic is going to have a greater influence on what happens. The other thing I'll say is that when we had, I'll just go back probably 10 years, rush hour traffic, both morning, afternoon, it was steady. And then about an hour after, I could walk from Crow River Bridge all the way up without seeing a car. And then rush hour comes on. That has changed. Now we are a drive-through community. People just, so, the concept of utilizing that for retail, of course it, generates thought, because the traffic that comes through is steady. And I look at every one of those as potential for retail. So that's really all I have to say about it.
If we have parking, I think Kirk, one of the daughters, they looked at opening up a coffee shop and they
A long
said,
time ago.
can't get any parking.
No, that wasn't the entire issue, the other.
ADA.
Sprinkling. And the,
protection.
and we didn't have the water to provide.
Wasn't there
at
an
that time.
wasn't there an ADA accessibility issue too, and the cost to retrofit things to make it work for business was really high, so that was, and I know I was talking to her, she said that was one of the biggest things that she ran into,
Yeah.
cost wise.
Yeah, water and sewer by far are our highest limitations in this area. 100%, no questions asked. It's 100% the issue is the water and the sewer. And it's not just the fact that no water flows there, it's the pressure behind it.
It's the storage.
Correct, it's the storage and being able to have that constant pressure there in the system. And then sewer is,
Surface water management, that's,
yeah,
that's.
sure. So there are limitations.
Okay.
The comment about the sprinkling, was that related to fire sprinklers for a commercial building?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We don't have the capacity to supply that.
No.
No, not the constant pressure.
Pressure, I mean,
No,
you
that's the
got,
deal.
you got a
With just
small
that 1,000
window,
gallon
and then
tank,
it's out.
you can't keep a constant pressure in there.
But
Eric?
Eric,
I just want to add, I very much appreciate this conversation. I apologize for being late. I couldn't get here any faster, but I love this. I look forward to whatever this group puts together. And it's really going to help with just the decision, the future of what's going to happen on there. And I very much want to be a partner, and let's produce something and then bring it to fruition that's going to benefit the entire city. We have a phenomenal opportunity. So again, thank you everybody for this effort, and looking forward. And if you want to have any conversations, reach out to me, please feel free. I'd love to sit down.
okay, so you think you have,
Yeah, I think we have direction unless anybody else in city staff doesn't feel it. I mean, we got exactly what we needed, was just have some direction, because we don't know what, we have no direction, we have no idea what to do, and we
Yep.
just provide something, and then it's like, oh, well, that would work, but does it really work long
sounds
term?
like really what we're missing here is engineering details.
Correct, yep,
More information.
yep, and we can put that together, and that could be all part of that.
Yeah, but knowing that you can slowly piece into it for the next 10 years.
If we
Yeah.
can do chunks at a
Well,
time.
what
Yeah.
pieces even, yeah.
Right.
Correct. Yeah, because once we have somebody interested in doing this piece or that piece,
Yeah.
say like the Zero, then we can go, okay, this is what works here in this area, now we can do this.
Yeah.
Or we can assist with, okay, now we need to have this corner needs to be done, so now we can help purchase this property to be able to do this whole thing to make the greater benefit of everybody. Yep.
But I think if you have the plan, then you can
Correct.
phase it through and have the right things going in at the right time. I think that's really important, that the engineering part of this is pretty solid.
Correct.
Can you put in a larger pipe, piece by piece?
Put it in the old one.
Can you go back to
Into the smaller pipe?
We can afford this much.
You know,
Yeah,
they
can you
couldn't
attach it to the
Just a
wall?
block at a time?
they couldn't have saved much doing that.
The smaller pipe.
Sizing down the
Well,
pipe.
so it's more complicated than that.
Was it? Okay.
Because it's not a gravity pipe, so it's not just more flow, bigger pipe. It's the combination of a lift station, which is how
Sure.
big, how much storage you have, what size pumps you have, and what diameter pipe. And then very dependent on what that pipe does. Does it
Yeah.
change elevation a
Okay,
lot? Does it get real
elevation changes, yeah,
high?
it goes
So it's a whole bunch of stuff that goes together to strike a balance. So you can't really, unfortunately, you can't really oversize them. You can't build
So
them
you
too far in the
can't put in a
future.
larger pipe without having enough flow to deal with, to fill
There's
the.
sometimes a balance you could do that, but you might have a pump that's kicking on and off very quick, which isn't good for the life of it
Oh,
either.
sure.
So you might burn out your equipment before you get the useful life out of it. So
Well,
if
it
it's
just-
all going
It
downhill,
just struck
things
me
become
as
a lot
odd
easier.
Yeah.
that
Definitely.
We didn't match
Gravity's
the
our
pipe
friend.
size? I would have thought they would have just matched the pipe size too.
Well, I would have thought they would have sized it so that, I mean, you look at it now, you say, and Jack did this when he bought the property.
Yeah.
You think you could build up, right, up on the Hilmer's property, except,
But just to give you a feel, when they put the water in 2002-ish, somewhere there,
2000, yep.
they had the choice of putting in a main that was capable of sprinkling all the buildings, or to go with a smaller size that was just for residential use. The cost differential that I was told at the time, not at the time, but afterwards, was 60 cents per foot.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
That was the cost differential for the sprinkling part, which was a big deal on the coffee shop.
Yeah.
They would have to pull out all that pipe to put in the slightly more expensive pipe, $6,000 minimum just to even get the permit to do the work. They could have done that correctly to start. That's why the planning is so important.
Okay, so we good? We're done?
That's it, yeah.
Sweet.
Appreciate it.